I'm not training today. I really don't want to be here. And the only reason I am at the gym right now is Miana didn't trust me to be home alone with all the snacks in the cupboard right now, considering I still gotta weigh in a week. But I think I can use the fact that I am here to help solve a problem that has resulted from the overall tiredness, laziness, sore as shitness that is happening at the end of this meet prep. Because it's like most of the time through the day, if I have 30 seconds of downtime, 45 seconds of downtime, a couple of minutes of downtime, I will just get on some movement prep, do some range of motion access, do some flexibility stuff, and kind of do the stuff that allows me to keep feeling loose and keep feeling limber through a training cycle. But then what starts to happen towards the end of the meet prep is like I'm so freaking tired that whenever I do have some downtime, like the last thing that I want to do is get on the floor and move. The first thing I want to do is lay my ass on the couch and just zonk out for 5 minutes if I get the chance. Which is sick because actually resting, actually relaxing is going to be the only way to actually create recovery. But the downside to that is it really doesn't help with like the stiffness, the soreness, the aches and ouchies that creep in through a peak. And what I've learned to do to combat that is towards the end of meet prep when I am feeling more tired and I am feeling more lazy as a result, and I am not as on my movement prep, I end up scheduling some dedicated movement prep sessions, which is what we're going to get into today. And we're going to start with a combination of rubbing various objects on me and rubbing myself on various objects.
Hello.
You know, a little bit of tissue work type stuff. And for the evidence-based crowd that might be watching this video, don't worry guys, I'm well aware that tissue work isn't actually changing anything structurally, it's just a transient neurological make shit feel better stimulus, but when I want to make shit feel better before I start moving it and using it, it is kind of nice to have a little bit of a, yeah, I don't know, this thing hurts. It's making it hard to talk or think right now. But it's like if I can give my sore spots a little bit of attention before I actually start using them, moving them, doing the range of motion access, doing the prep work that's actually going to do the work, I find I can be a little bit more productive, and it's a little bit like mentally easier to get into it if I have done some tissue stuff before I start trying to move. And like for the inevitable question that someone's going to ask about my take on body tempering, it's like no matter what tissue work is, whether it is a giant metal roller on me or like me on top of a roller, or if I got Joel to neuro massage me and slide all over with a bunch of oil, it's just like artificial pressure being applied to the mechanoreceptors that's going to send a stimulus up to the brain to be like, hey, this stuff can move, this stuff can be used. So it's like I don't think body tempering is stupid, but I also don't think it's something magical. And like in the context of this, like it's a very easy way to apply pressure to my groin that feels nice. So I'm using it as a tool because it feels nice. But if Joel was willing to strip down and slide on top of me, I would much rather prefer that tool. And for those that are curious, this guy is like 173 pounds, and I got it from a local metal supply shop in Calgary in 2018. Like it was just like a hunk of rusty giant steel rod that I had to just grind all of the rust off of, and then just brought it here, and it's hung out for the last 6 years, I guess. Fuck. Ooh. And like, I'm never trying to tissue work everything. I'm just trying to like tissue work my parts that feel sticky that could benefit from the unstickiness sensation that follows tissue work. And next up is we're going to get into a little bit of stretchy stretch range of motion access stuff, starting with just doing some like kneeling squats, kneeling holds, kind of reverse Nordic type stuff. But I can't do a reverse Nordic because I'm fat, and if I were to extend my hips, I'd just roll over my feet. So this is as good as we get, but really just trying to lengthen the quads and make the knees go bendy bend and feel nice. I'll just kind of hang out here and do this for a couple of minutes before we move on. And then next up is my favorite stretch of all time, which is basically like a fat guy version of the pretzel stretch because I'm too obese and immobile to get into an actual pretzel. But if I get the band behind me, I can get into that knee flexion. Like my knee is bent behind me. If you guys can't see the camera angle, I don't know if you can, but basically I'm in this position, and the goal is to kind of get my heel as far up as I can. I'm going to rotate a little bit so you can see, but as much quad stretch as I can. And then my goal is to try to drop the knee towards the floor, and it feels so freaking good through like all of this shit. I don't know. It is very nice, and I find that like if I'm stuck overarched in a squat or overarching into my deadlift wedge, this is the best like static stretch I can do to kind of help with getting the front side more nimble, bimble, limber, loosey-goosey, so I can have a better brace and get more rib to pelvis tension to counter the tightness pulling into the overarch. I'm just hanging out, spending a couple minutes trying to like progressively get further into the stretchy stretch as I go. And like, again, I know one bout of static stretching isn't going to change a ton, but it does feel nice, and I think it helps. And thinking it helps is all that really matters at this point in the meet prep. And next up, we're going to get into the hips a little bit with some incline pigeon hingy bobbers, loading with the kettlebell in the down hand, just trying to like push into stretch in this butt cheek, drive knee down, come up, and just, again, feel good, move, contract ass, you know the drill. And a mistake I see people doing on these is like their back leg is like right kicked up, and then they're just kind of like going like this. You'll get so much more leverage on this hip you're trying to stretch if you kick your back foot leg back into a bit of extension. I gotta move this decline bench this way, but if you get that stance nice and long, it opens things up so much more. It's gonna kind of force the pelvis to actually want to roll forward into that hip, and it just makes it so much more betterer, and more betterer is what we want. Now we'll use the incline bench for balance as we get into the other side of hip rotation for some single leg RDLs. And like what I'm trying to do here is on my back leg, I'm trying to guide my back foot across to get the adductors going a little bit, which is going to help push me into hip IR, push me into the lateral hip, and then I can try to hinge out of that stretch, contract glute, lateral hip to drive me up to the top. And you can also kind of think about trying to guide the kettlebell over your foot, and that's going to help you get into more of that IR on the hip that we are stretching into. And something else I'm mindful of with these as well is, even though I'm trying to like get into that IR, if I feel that IR stretch, I'm really trying to drive the movement with my glute max and feel glute max squeezing all the way up to the top. And I was gonna jump right into some ATG split squats, but I realized I forgot to touch my adductors, so gotta do some Copenhagen around. And when I say around, I mean I'm gonna try to rotate around the hip a little bit to expose the rotational component of the adductors hair, because that always feels like it needs some touching for me. And then when that feels like it's doing its thing, gonna go into some dippy doos and just get those adductors to actually lengthen and shorten so they're ready to do their thing, lengthening and shortening during a squat and deadlift. And the last thing I like to play with is a little bit of flexion, a little bit of extension, so I'm like sucking myself towards the bench, pushing off, and this is really gross feeling, so give her a whirl if you want to. And then I gotta do the other side. That really hurt my knee hitting on the bench. Ouchie. Like just like got like the tender part like right above the kneecap, and it's just like icky, icky, yuck, yuck. But anyways, more of the same. Which now brings us into the ATG split squats, and like you guys have seen me do these 10 billion times with my very sad flexibility that kind of is a disgrace to the purpose of these, but the whole goal is to get knee travel on the front leg, hip extension on the back leg, drive yourself up, access that length, feel good, have fun. I don't know. They're nice. And now we are moving on to the upper body segment of the show, where my greatest concern is my flexibility to get underneath the squat bar. So we're starting with some McLeod flies. And the key to making these guys work is trying to drive your elbows forward, so creating extra rotation of the shoulder sockets. If you just like let your elbows dump back, you end up just doing a normal fly, which isn't going to help with that squat bar mobility. Next up, we're going to touch the creating thoracic extension part of getting under the squat bar equation, with some pullovers lined up perpendicular to the bench so that I can try to like arch over the pad and anchor my rib cage on it to help me with creating more actual T-spine extension. And like one of my favorite things to do when I'm doing a pullover to make them feel less sketchy on my kind of sketchy shoulders is, instead of just like trying to reach like behind me, I'm trying to reach as high as I can, and then more behind me kind of happens, but it also feels better because there's more serratus holding my shoulder blade together. Look at these losers actually training. Aren't those some muscular forearms? Wow. So juicy. And the last thing I'm going to run for flexibility to get into the squat bar is going to be some scrape the rack behind the neck presses from my squat bar position. And that might sound confusing, so I'm just going to set up and start doing it. But the whole goal here is to use the rack so I can push my rib cage through, get into a bigger stretch, guide the bar down to where I'm going to be under the bar, and just kind of spend some time hanging out in this position, trying to kind of almost over-exaggerate the range, push myself back into the bar. Can even do like the behind the necks from this position. And I think the key thing to remember with these is we want to be working to manage our ribcage position, so we're not just like dumping into lumbar extension, really flailing out. We want to make sure we're stacked, abs are on, our brace is realistic to our squat. That way we're going to get carryover to the position we want to be in underneath that squat bar. And the last thing we're going to do is touch a little shoulder internal rotation with some banded chicken wings. And I know Donnie Thompson likes to get butthurt thinking that I stole this from him, but Donnie's version of this guy has the band up around the shoulder socket, so you don't have a lot of leverage over the shoulder IR. You're mostly just training scapular retraction from a protracted position. But if you put the band down around the elbow, you're getting that shoulder internal rotation with the scapular retraction and getting all of that shit to work together, and it's really nice. So yeah, that is all that I think I need to do in order to feel good during this little feel-good session so that I can feel good for tomorrow's SBD Taperino Mabobber that we are going to be rolling on. And like, I don't know how much this type of training, this type of session, this type of movement prep actually accomplishes structurally or like really makes changes. But what I do know is that the biggest thing is like if I can walk into a session like this feeling like absolute ass and then be sitting here going like, hey, shit's moving good, shit's moving good, shit's feeling good, it makes me so much more confident that after I warm up tomorrow, no matter how I feel when I wake up in the morning, I will at least be able to feel good enough to get the job done in the session. And I know that as the feels improve through the taper week, we're going to be really good to go on meet day. So peace out, guys. Have a good rest of your night.
I started Team Activated to make real powerlifting coaching accessible for everyone. This is not a copy and paste program. This is giving you the feedback, education, and understanding necessary to set up a program for your needs and progress it as you go. And we're going to do that on two fronts. First, the classroom is a place for you to ask any question that you have and post your training so that we can see your lifts in order to analyze your weak points, coach your technique, and give you exercise selection and programming recommendations based on what you need right now. And as you progress, as things change, we will be able to guide you along the way. If you need more help, you will be able to hop on a video call with me twice a week so that we can talk face to face about whatever issue you are stuck on. The other half of the team is the classroom, where we're not just telling you what to think, but teaching you how to think about training. We have exclusive modules on conjugate periodization, biomechanics, injury rehab, plus my entire movement prep exercise index at your disposal. We're also hosting live lecture deep dives every single month where we're going to tackle the more nuanced topics in training. So, why is this better than getting a program? Even if I write you the most perfect program, you're only going to have something to follow for the next 12 weeks. But if I teach you how to think about programming and coach you along the way, you will have something to follow for the rest of your training career. Oh, and if you really want a program to follow, we have a weekly updated conjugate plan that is flexible enough for you to modify to fit your needs. So, what are you waiting for? Hit that link to join and let's smash some PRs.